there are so many variables influencing motivation levels that actually, all sorts of factors that are completely beyond our control, that, to be honest, from the perspective of my classroom, my group of students, I would say there's very little we can do, or I can do as a teacher. There's very little I can do about it. Okay. And one of the comments today that I saw in the feed said, well, it's good to know that at least it's not just my teenagers who are like that, but it seems that all of the teenagers are like that. And they are. After Lamb from 2004, and I will, the list of references, the bibliography for this session will be there included. You will see it at the end of the session, but it will also be included in the slides that you get at some point after this event. So anyway, after Lamb 2004, we can say that, yes, motivation does decline as students move through school. Quote, over the course of the school years, student behavior on the average declines or becomes less adaptive, with a large drop as students enter the junior high school, middle school. And this is exactly the students that we are dealing with, okay? And it seems that it's very common. It's the same for all teenagers all over the world. And that's not even that. That's, the general drop at a certain age, but also the motivation within an individual ebbs and flows, goes up and down. It comes and goes on a daily basis. Let me tell you now an example of a 14-year-old girl who used to be, or the beginning of the school year, she was kind of, engaged and participating and kind of seemed interested, Now, the same teenager is currently going through a major life drama involving her bestie and a boy that she has a crush on. Now, tell me, what levels of motivation to learn English will she bring to your classroom? I'm guessing very little, marginal, if any, okay? And that's basically a general trend. This fall in enthusiasm for formal learning is a worldwide trend in this particular age group. Okay, students are going, there are so many things, difficult things going on in their brains, in their minds, in their environments, that I honestly think that motivation is not something we should actually focus on. Especially that, okay, motivation will help you become more autonomous, or motivation will help your learners become more autonomous, but it doesn't determine it. In other words, motivation may enhance learner autonomy, and it's an asset, but not a requirement. In other words, we can foster learner autonomy regardless of whether the students are motivated or not, okay? And that should be that's basically my focus for today. So by motivating students to take learning, or take responsibility for their own learning, I mean like encouraging them and showing them the right way, right? Especially that, look at this one. It seems, and that's, these are the quotes that I found in the articles I found just before, while I was getting ready for this particular session, with the literature review on the correlation between autonomy and learner autonomy and motivation. After Thalen from 2021, giving learners more autonomy yields intrinsic motivation. So let's not focus on motivation, which is so difficult for us kind of to do, if possible at all. Let's do something to make the learners more autonomous and more responsible for what they do in the language learning process. And this, in turn, once they feel responsible, once they feel good about themselves, this will positively influence their motivation levels. Another interesting quote after Ushiora from 2001, autonomous learners are, by definition, motivated learners. I did not find anywhere in the literature saying that motivated learners are, by definition, autonomous. It doesn't work the other way around. So my suggestion for today, forget motivation for a little bit. Let me digress for a moment. If you really want to focus, like from the psychological point of view, if you really want to focus on something and put your effort into something kind of psychological in the classroom, put it into building a rapport with your students, because this will definitely pay off, right? But motivation as such, like I said, it's very difficult to influence for us, being, just really the teachers of English who meet our students once, twice, maybe 3 times a week. We can, however, focus, and we should focus on learner autonomy. Now, one thing that I'd like to underline here, or maybe let me define learner autonomy at this point. Well, learner autonomy is taking responsibility for your own learning. It is usually associated with, students doing things on their own, seeking opportunities for language practice in their free time. So learner autonomy is usually associated with such activities or actions taken by the learner in which, they read something in English, they perhaps, borrow graded readers from the library and read them in their free time. Now, think about your teenagers and your and your typical class. How likely are they to seek extra practice opportunities in their free time? I would say the chances are rather marginal, aren't they? There are, however, it doesn't mean, however, that there's nothing we can do. We can do a number of teacher-initiated, or we can take a number of teacher-initiated steps, right? So kind of, they are slightly orchestrated by the teacher. We are not counting on the learners to do things on their own. No, we kind of show the students how to do things, what they can do, showing them a whole range of options, which with time will change into some kind of habits. And those habits, hopefully, one day will change into what we call learner autonomy. And that's basically what I'm going to talk about today. These are those, like a practical toolkit, really, for with tasks, techniques, and procedures that will help your learners do something with, with the language, with the course book, with the text, something on their own, to kind of encourage them to get engaged in some kind of a self-study, one type or another, okay? And like I said, it's teacher-initiated. We are not counting one thing. Okay, perhaps let me, and this thought will prevail throughout the rest of this webinar as well. As teachers of, especially as teachers of teenagers, we can't take anything for granted. We can never assume that students will either do something or they know something, right? And I think that acknowledging this very fact kind of will help us avoid quite a lot of frustration in the, from our work, from what we do, because why do I expect my teachers to do something and assume something that they know while they actually don't know it, and the fact that they don't perform, it's frustrating for me. So it's better kind of to acknowledge the fact that they don't know, and kind of always not take anything for granted, I would say. So here it is, all the toolkits, all the whole toolkit kind of that I want you to take with you from this particular webinar comes in 3 different strands, or 3 major strands. The first one I called learning strategies. The second one deals with classroom management, how to, divide tasks, manage tasks, and what to do with them. And then I'll show you how to use digital tools in such a way that you promote, you make students responsible for their own learning somehow, or you promote somehow their self-study, well, in one way or another. Let us start with learning strategies. The first one, the first 2 things, and kind of the umbrella term for these is learning that, well, I came up with really, is learning strategies. And I'm going to talk about 2 things, and that's study techniques and explicit strategy training. Now, let me start with the study techniques. And again, I'd like you to imagine something, or perhaps tell me if this situation sounds familiar. You give students a test, students take a test, you mark it, and then a few days later, a few lessons later, you distribute the marked tests, and then there are always students, always in any group really, who are really disappointed with the results. And this doesn't mean they necessarily that they fail the test. They may just, get a C while they were expecting an A. And they usually say the same thing. But I was studying. Really, just to see, I was studying all night. Does that sound familiar? I think it does. And when my students say it, I kind of believe them. I actually believe them. I really know. Why would they lie to me? It's not something that I could verify in any way. So I actually believe them, because what I know from experience is that, unfortunately, students don't know how to study. They don't know how to study because nobody has ever taught them how to study. Let me give you an example of how I would say a typical teenager is studying for a vocabulary test. So he or she opens either a notebook or the vocabulary list, and they basically start by reading what is in the book, what is on the list, or what is in the notebook. They read the notes or the vocabulary list once, then they read it again, and they probably reread it for the third time. Once they start rereading the same notes for the third or fourth time, their brains recognize what is there written on the page. So what is the automatic reaction of a teenager or any student who doesn't really know how to study? They say, got it, I know it, close the book, close the notebook, I'm ready. But it's so not true. What has just happened here is that your brain has led you into that illusion of mastery. You think you know it because your brain recognizes certain things on the page, but that's not true. You don't know anything. In order for you to verify whether you've learned something or not, is either to retrieve the form that you are learning, of the verbs, the words, the phrases, or retrieve the meaning. So it's the retrieval, then recalling the phrases, recalling the words, recalling the grammar structures that actually will help you verify whether you have learned something or not. Okay? And, I know that here among teachers, we are all among teachers, all of us are quite successful learners of a language because we all speak English at a pretty good level. But I am totally convinced that it's obvious for you, but most of your students don't know that. They don't know it. So what can we do? Okay, so let's assume that's a vocabulary page from Optimized Stars. Let's assume that that's the vocabulary students are supposed to study. What I would tell my students is the following. First of all, write down all of the words that are new to you with their mother tongue translations or mother tongue equivalents. My mother tongue is Polish, so what you see in here on the left side are the English words, on the right-hand side, you've got the Polish translations. And first, what do we do to make sure we do not just read it and recognize things on this page, on the slide? Well, if you want to retrieve the meaning, do this. You can work with the vocabulary list, you can work with your own note, but make sure that you say it on your own, you write it on your own. There is some kind of effort involved. There has to be some kind of effort involved. So what happens here? Cover the L1 translations, the L1 equivalents, and you have to retrieve or recall the meaning of these words. What do we do now to retrieve the form? Well, as simple as that. You change sides. You cover the English, the target forms. You look at the Polish words, and your task is to retrieve the meaning, to actually recall and say the words for yourself. And if you can do this, so first, if you can say these words and then you can write these words, that's when you can tell, or that's when you can say, yes, I have learned the words by heart. And let me tell you one more thing. For you, it's obvious. For your students, not really, because nobody has ever taught them how to study. And it's just one of the study techniques. There are plenty of others. Just, I think, the time for today is limited. We could probably have a separate session, a webinar on study techniques. But I think what I suggest to do in the classroom is like, be alert, like kind of, okay, so if I give my students a test, perhaps I should tell them how they should study for it. Or if I ask my students to do something, perhaps I could kind of give them some precise directions. Why? Because this is how I want them to be responsible for the learning. So I need to give them tools. It's not enough to say, okay, I'm expecting responsibility, but you can manage on your own. It will never work like this. Another example, the same vocabulary set. Study the vocabulary on page 23, then close the book and note down 20 words that you remember. Why 20? In total, there are 40 vocabulary items on the page. Chances are that 10 of those are the students will be familiar with, right? So if I tell them, okay, and write 10, that's too easy. There's no effort behind it. They will probably write down the words they had known before. If I tell 15, this is where some kind of effort begins. At 20, they actually have to have learned something, kind of, okay? So see, just the very basic study techniques. Another thing is, like, I always encourage my students to work together, to study for tests together, because they can when they work in pairs or in groups, they can quiz one another on what they are supposed to learn. And also that's a good verification of whether I've learned something or they've learned something or not. The next point under the heading learning strategies will be explicit strategy training. Now, let me first say why explicit. Because again, we are not taking anything for granted. If we feel that something is important for students to pass the exam, to progress, just say it out loud. You will have in any exam course, you will have lots of exam strategies or text strategies or reading strategies. Just focus on them explicitly. I would never omit or skip any kind of strategy like this, because this later on will help students to survive on their own and take responsible for their own learning and engage in some kind of self-study. Now, why is this so important from the point of view of autonomy? Let me quote Scott Thornberry here. Autonomous learning assumes that the learner has well-developed learning strategies, right? So in order to be autonomous, you have to have some tools. You have to be equipped with, how to go about it. Now, if you just a quick one, learning strategies, an old concept, still very popular and still very valid, that dates back to the 1970s. Basically, back in the 1970s, the scientists, researchers, ELT scientists, they discovered that for some reason, some learners are better than others. And once they started researching and examining those better learners, they figured out they simply use some extra things, some special techniques. They employ some special actions which help them either deal with the material or organize their learning. Of all the researchers dealing with learning strategies, the most comprehensive taxonomy of those strategies came from Rebecca Oxford. She came up with as many as six. She identified, really, because that's all research based. She identified 64 different learning strategies, which she put under two headings. The first group was direct strategies, or is really, in which helps learners like deal with the language, with the material, with the text, with the thinking processes. And the other one was the indirect strategies, which help learners, manage the learning, get organized, work with others, look for help, and things like that. And now let me show you one now, very briefly, how we can teach these and incorporate, just kind of in the form of, and it's not something necessarily planned. You will see in a moment, this is very opportunistic. All of the really strategies that I'm going to show you are examples of opportunistic teachings, or could be examples. The direct strategies, for example, structured reviewing. For us, for you, for me, it's kind of obvious that if you start learning or start studying for a test in any subject, really, the day before, it may not be particularly successful, right? But again, You cannot take anything, we cannot take things for granted. Students don't know that. Let me give you an example. My son, who is learning Spanish at the moment, when I suggested that, he should probably open the Spanish notebook and leaf through the notes, or just read something, look at things, reread the notes, maybe learn the vocabulary for a while, he was totally surprised. People really do that? So, we are not taking, like I said, we are not taking things for granted again. So just show the students, or tell them, okay, so guys, you've got there's a test next week, and I don't think it will help for you to start learning the day before. If, however, within the next 5, 6, 7 days, you spend 10 to 15 minutes studying your notes and learning things from the book, from the course book, your chances of a high score go automatically up, for instance. Another example, taking notes. Very often, I think I think it is a common problem, because at schools, state schools, most students will have, that they are obliged at least to have a notebook. In private courses or private language schools, those notebooks are quite rare, But perhaps once we tell the students, listen, it's very important. This is your primary source of information. This is your knowledge. It's external. This is how you make it internal later on. Another example, guessing intelligently. This is, when students deal with a difficult text, okay? They struggle through reading comprehension. Just show them they don't need to understand everything to actually do the task, okay? Or they can actually figure out the meaning of many words on their own. And again, this is kind of opportunistic teaching, as you see students are struggling with a text. The same with that. Now let's move on to the indirect strategies, setting goals and objectives. Like us educators, teachers, we kind of know what is going on in the classroom on a global scale. Let me put it that way. For the students, not really. In other words, for you, you know that in Unit 1, you were doing personality adjectives and, some appearance. And then now you're on Unit 2, when you're covering different places in the city and different types of houses and whatnot, right? You know that. But for the student, he just comes in, looks at the page, most usually go home, and that's it. Whenever you have a chance, just help them take a step back to take this bird's eye view on what they are studying, because this is how you can help them become more responsible, to realize what is it that what we are doing here in the classroom. Look, for example, so whenever you have any kind of this, whenever you have those sections in the course book, and I know that a lot of modern course book offer those, like for example here, setting your goals, showing students how to set their outcomes, what do they, or determine what outcomes they want to achieve. Or another type of a section that is also present again in most course books these days, it's a kind of self-evaluation checklist with the can-do statements. Okay, I can understand reference to words to understand the order of a text, or predict what I might hear in an interview, and so on. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that these are very important, have a very important role in making students feel responsible for their own learning. And I would say that on a number of occasions, if we are pressed for time with the syllabus, these two are the first ones to get omitted. And I'm pretty sure you will agree with me that, let's face it, the can-do statements at the end of the unit, or something like, setting the goals and, thinking about the learning, all sorts of metacognitive strategies to manage their own learning, they are not our priority in the classroom, because we are pressed for time with other things. However, talking with the students about these things, it does just that, it makes them feel more responsible for the things that are going on in the classroom. You can also discuss feelings with the students or cooperate with others. Let me show you a procedure that was suggested by William Mercer and Ryan in their book on psychology in language learning. Their idea is, and that's actually, a very good, a very good first step if you want to kind of start dabbling in learning strategies, is to ask students about what they actually do. The idea is to ask the students to tell you some of the strategies they use to learn the language. There are 3 columns here: ways I learn new language, ways I communicate in the language, and ways I control my anxieties. So see, there's discuss the feelings. The next step would be to allow students to mix in different groups so that they can share their experiences. Maybe they will be able to learn from one another. Let me focus on this last column, the anxieties here. And again, some of the modern course books, that's definitely what the sections will be named differently. In Optimize STARS, this is called Optimize Your Wellbeing. It allows students to take a moment to think about their emotions also. Sometimes, look at this one, sometimes it's hard to concentrate. When I have a lot to do, I sometimes feel angry, or I often get headaches and stomach aches, I'm worried, and so on. And after that, students are shown how to do a short mindfulness activity. 2 reasons here. First of all, this is how you treat your students as mature human beings, by allowing them to talk about their feelings and emotions in the classroom. Secondly, that kind of helps you to, to push that responsibility more for the learning and for the learning outcomes towards the students. And finally, something that I've already said today, this definitely listen to the student's voice definitely helps you build rapport, which I believe, from the perspective of a person who deals with teenagers on a daily basis, is much more important than trying to motivate them, to kind of have that positive relationship. Okay, then. So these were my learning strategies. Now let's move on to the classroom management. And again, there are 2 concepts that I'd like to present. One is something that you're probably familiar with, and it's flipped classroom. The other one, I'm going to show you how to listen to the student's voice. The flipped classroom idea, by definition, it's asking students to do something before the lesson so that they come to your class with a certain degree of knowledge. Now, what I want to show you today is the idea of a flipped classroom by Russell Stannard. Very interesting, in my view, based on Bloom's higher order and lower order thinking skills. So basically what Russell Stannard suggests, and you can watch his workshop and his sessions online if you Google them. So the idea is the following. In the regular traditional, just in inverted commas, the traditional classroom, we would start with some basics, some understanding, some remembering, so the knowledge, the bits and pieces of the knowledge, let's say linguistic knowledge, and then tell students to take this knowledge outside the classroom and do something more creative, more advanced with it, okay? And that's typical homework quite often. In the flipped classroom idea, and that's what he suggests, let's change the order. Let's ask the students to do some basics at home before the lesson, so that in the classroom, we can focus on creative thinking, evaluating, analyzing, and so on. Let me show you how it works with an example of a grammar lesson. Now, every grammar lesson has a grammar explanation in it, right? This one here is present perfect simple and present perfect continuous. And there are some rules explained. And, and this is what I would ask my students to do before the lesson on their own in the form of a self-study. And now, mind you, because I think that the words and the instruction here is very important, because what I could do is tell my students, okay, so now as your homework, please read the blue box, the remember box on page 22. So I could say that. I could, however, tell my students the following. So listen, I've noticed that your grammar is pretty strong, and I would like to focus on things that are perhaps more advanced here. But in order to do so, I would like you to get kind of come to my lesson a little bit prepared. And if you please, could you read and get acquainted with this particular box before our next lesson? Do you see the difference is immense, I would say. I mean, you still ask the students to do the same, but the way, kind of the very instruction kind of is also very important. Apart from all the grammar explanations, grammar rules, another thing that is also very useful in that flipped classroom setup are grammar videos. I've recently noticed that quite a lot of courses have included grammar videos. This one is an example from Optimized Stars, but I also, well, there are more. And even if you work with something that doesn't really, even if you work with a course book that doesn't offer you grammar videos, you can find some of them online and look for what your students would really need. So, of course, I could ask my students, so listen, just watch this video before the lesson, but I could also do something different and change it into a, give it a tangible outcome, really, by doing this. So before the lesson, watch the video and either take notes, or this is all about plural, countable, affirmative, some, fewer, many, much, and so on. So watch the video and write down two countable, two uncountable nouns, or watch the video and prepare a question to your teacher. In other words, what is it that you want to ask me about? Is there anything, do you understand, do you know everything? Do you understand all the rules that I explained here? Or is there anything you would like to ask me about? So, and again, it's something that students do before the lesson. So it's the homework, the typical homework is what you have to do after the lesson, like a follow-up. The flipped classroom is kind of asking students to get ready for the next lesson, for what is to come. And that's one thing, the flipped classroom. Another thing that I want to show you is how to listen to the student's voice. And again, after Thornbury from 2018, let me quote, giving students some say in the choice and management of classroom activities is a step in the direction of autonomy. In other words, if you want to create learners who take responsibility of their own learning, I mean, for goodness sake, we have to give them that responsibility somehow. And here's my suggestion how to do it. That's just the, grammar and vocabulary review. That one's from Optimized Stars, but every single course book has it. It's usually quite a mundane sequence of activities, one after another, one after another, one after another. Not a major thrill during the lesson. Let me tell you what I do with it to kind of also to make the students feel more empowered and to listen to their voice. I would tell them the following. Let's assume that I've got 15 minutes left at the end of the lesson. And I would tell the instructions that I would give as follows. So what I would like you to do now and then at home is to do some self-study, right? To do things on your own. Now, you've got 15 minutes now before the end of the lesson, and I'd like you to choose the activities that you want to do now, and what you don't do is going to be your homework, right? I want you to continue afterwards, after the lesson, alone. So I would also give a hint as to, so the choice is yours. You may have to decide if you want to start with the easiest and do as many as possible, or perhaps start with the most difficult, because I'm here to help you if necessary. But the choice, that's the student's choice, And out of what I've seen, and working with teenagers, but especially having one at home, is like giving them a choice, like changes everything. Or in other words, and that's basically my thought, not so much as a teacher, and it's not something like, research-based or literature-based, more like personal life-based. Nothing spoils the relationship with a teenager more than being authoritative. I mean, okay, we direct the learning process. We are responsible for the outcomes. We are responsible for this syllabus. But let's face it, there are so many moments in the lesson, during the course, that we can give our students a choice. And I'm a big fan of that. So that's a classroom management. The last point is the digital tools. I promise just 5 minutes tops. First of all, again, a lot of modern course books will offer the digital component, be it games or apps or some kind of digital practice, right? And that's lovely. The one thing that I strongly advise you to do is to, again, tell your students when and how to use it. I mean, for me, the best time to use all sorts of digital devices or digital, help really that the course book offers would be on a bus to school or from school or to the language school or to my class, right? Because it's still like the 15 minutes, the 20 minutes the students spend on the bus, it's still their screen time. I mean, very few teenagers actually sit on the bus or a tram reading, right? They all glued to their phones. So perhaps instead of just chatting and going on social media, they could do some English practice. One more thing that how I can show my students, or actually maybe help them discover things on their own, is by the use of ChatGPT. The example of an exam task that you can see in the slide now comes from the preliminary for schools. But the reason for it is because the course book that I showed you, the examples from prepare students for preliminary for school. So just for the sake of consistency, I chose that particular exam. In this particular task, students have to read the email from the teacher and then respond to it. The most usual problem of all my students with this kind of tasks will be the register and the levels of formality. Okay, let me show you, and I often tell my students to use ChatGPT, give different feed, who the letter is from, how to write it, what to change, so that they can discover things on their own. Look, this is something that I asked ChatGPT to, what I got from ChatGPT after asking it to write me a note that I'm not going to be at school today. So subject is missing school today. Just wanted to let you know that I won't be at school today. I'll catch up on anything I miss. Yeah. And then I changed the instruction and said, write a note to my teacher that I won't be at school today. Look at the register, look at the level of formality. The subject is no longer missing school today. The subject is absence from school. Dear teacher, the name, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to let you know that I'm unable to attend school today. I will catch up on my missed work as soon as possible, and so on. And this is something that students can figure out on their own. So the digital tools, including this one, definitely help students to take control of their own learning. And one final thing that I would encourage you to do is to chat up a group, group or class WhatsApp group. For several reasons, really. You create a community in which, well, we can make sure that we can try, or we can do quite a lot of things to make sure it's supportive, in which students remind one another. They are left, as a group, they take the learning automatically outside the classroom, because, the WhatsApp group will be with them all the time. And also just, a minor thing, that one extra minor benefit is that you can actually provide them with quite a lot of exposure to valuable language data, like, all sorts of phrases, just a quick reminder, have you thought about, who's getting ready, who wants to, something is drawing near, and so on. So your feed can be also valuable linguistically. And I promise I'm done. I'm sorry for the delay. Let me just tell you a final comment on it. I promised that I would tell you, that was the title for this session, that we'll talk about how to make learners fly. And well, I think what I've shown you today is really how to leave the cage open, or how to open the cage with the particular tools and tasks, with the whole toolkit, really. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will take something out of it, ready to be used in the lesson starting tomorrow morning, maybe. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Absolutely great. Take a breather. Thank you.
Yes.
Really nice. Absolutely jam-packed full of advice for the teachers and really relevant as well. Really hitting home, I think, the particular problems that you clearly know teachers have with teaching teenagers and being a parent of teenagers as well.
Mm.
Um, so I think I'm just going to ask if anyone's got any questions for Carolina. We haven't got very long, so if you've got a question now, please do. Um, and we will ask. They're asking for someone's asked for your Instagram. Do you have a professional Instagram, Carolina?
I don't.
No. Okay, don't worry about it.
Oh, it
And
sounds
can you
like
have
a
access?
thought. It sounds like a thought, really.
Yeah, yeah. Why not? Instagram's pretty
Yeah.
good. You know, if you can, you're good on camera. If you're good at sort of giving advice in that sort of respect.
Mm.
Instagram's great for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Instagram laps up that kind of skill. Um, Thank you very much, Carolina.
Yes.
Take a break.
Thank you
We'll
so
see you
much.
in about
Okay. See you
five
later.
hours for another one.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Have a nice break. See you.
Bye.
Okay. We are almost there. Let me just get myself ready. 1 second. Okay. How are you all feeling? That was a mammoth. That was about 2 hours and 20 minutes already. How are you all doing? How do you feel after 2 hours and 20 minutes of teacher training? Fine. I feel fine after 2 hours and 20 minutes. Good. Tired but recharged, Cynthia. Amazing. Good stuff. Still going, John. Okay. Brilliant. Let me share my screen. Keep it coming. I want to know how you're feeling. I agree. And that's the one thing I like about webinars, actually, because you're kind of, I mean, I don't know where you are. I'm at home. You know, I generally work. I've got a little a room at home where I work. And I like webinars because you're in the comfort of your own home. There's a drink nearby. There's someone nearby. Just sort of, it's all very homely, but you can still do that. You can still sort of experience an event like that. That's what I like about webinars, I think. Anyway, the final giveaway for today. This is your final thing you're getting from us today. And it's a board game. But it's not like Rivals of Catan or Monopoly or name a couple of board games that you like. Um, I love board games. But this is a learning board game, which is aimed at your teenage learners. So it's not just for fun. It's designed to enhance your learners' exam skills in a fun and collaborative way. It's aiming to also equip them with techniques to ensure exam success. It's free. You just need to click the link to download it. It's yours. It'll be in the virtual goodie bag as well, so you can grab it then too. But please do go and take a look. We've created it especially for you. I hope you enjoy it. And I think that'll probably about do it. Is the link in the chat box? Everyone see the link? Yeah, the link's there. Nice. And it's also popped up on the screen, I think. Zoom's new feature. A link on the screen. Okay. I'm going to be closing down in a sec. I've already mentioned this, but I'll mention it one more time. We've got an Adults Day happening in 2 weeks' time. Through three wonderful speakers, Esin Chaglayan, Megan Walker, and Miranda Richardson. Please do go and take a look at that, talking about AI, talking about online learning as well, and critical reading for university students. So that's really cool. An event coming up in 2 weeks' time to sort of close our segments. We had young learners, teens, and then we've got adults. And then we've got this amazing event happening in a couple of weeks' time. Please register for it now. You will regret not registering for this if you see a video of it not being there live to experience this. Um, Jeremy Harmer is going to be singing and playing the guitar for everybody. He's very talented. I met him recently and he showed me some of his stuff. Genuinely talented musician, if you haven't already seen him. Fabiana Perano is wonderful, very, very enthusiastic and passionate theatrical designer. I think she might maybe like that. I think I like the way of calling that. For schools. So she works on theatre productions for schools, and she's going to teach ways to embed theatre and drama into your classroom. Ben Crystal will be performing for us. He's got his wonderful gift of the gab, his spoken voice, and teaching us how to use that performance aspect of your voice to train your learners to perform in English. Simon Gafella, does anybody remember him? He spoke a couple of years ago at the Global Teachers Festival. What is Simon's specialty? What does he do? Why don't you have a guess? What's Simon's specialty? Look at him. What do you think he does? What does Simon do? Simon Gafella. Fella. Christina. Simon is not a hairdresser. He's not a drummer. That's a good try. He's an opera singer. Simon is an opera singer by profession, but he also teaches the skills that he's learnt to project and speak and enunciate when he's singing. He has also converted into a pronunciation course, and he's going to give us a little taster of that at this event. So he'll be singing for us, and his voice is beautiful. He'll be singing for us, and he'll be teaching us those techniques that he uses in class to help people with their pronunciation, enunciation, and projection. I know, Margaret, what a great event. So please do register for that now. You've got an email coming in the next day or so. Sorry, in the next day or so, in the next week or so. So please do keep an eye out for that. It might go to your junk, your spam folder. It's got your certificates and it's got your virtual goodie bag as well. Facebook and LinkedIn viewers, you can register for the third event today to get this, but we don't give it away on the social media platforms. You need to register to get the goodie bag and the certificates. That's it. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. And can't wait to see you in a few weeks. If you come, lovely to see you, and I'll see you then. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.